Welcome to Curiosity Killed the Coach, a podcast for coaches and leaders that want to grow their coaching skills. Today, we're going to talk about why you should invest in yourself.
How to face your fears, the power of being yourself, and
We'll have some Chris Doe selling on the side.
interested? Keep listening.
Yes.
Michel and I, every Wednesday we try to record, we try to drop an episode.
Yeah.
But last Wednesday we had to skip one. But for a very good reason, I think. Michel decided to invest in himself.
Yes.
Go all the way to London and learn from, I think, creative content creator, marketing guru. I don't know what this guy does, but he's all over YouTube. His name is Chris Doe.
Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, I'm so missing Michel on a Wednesday. What is happening on him? What is he doing? What is he learning? We thought, why not make that into an episode?
Yeah.
Because curiosity was killing this coach. He was killing this coach. Today we're going to talk about that. I think that's the topic for today's podcast.
Yeah, to keep it a bit into the context of Curiosity Killed the Coach, for me, it has to do with keeping on learning. That's the thing. And that's what I try to do as a coach as well, because there's a lot of things we still don't know and a lot of things we can learn.
What made you decide to invest in yourself, to go to this particular workshop?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
A good question. So for me, I had a problem to solve. And you mentioned Chris is a designer. And I know him mostly from his podcast, the Future podcast, and also from YouTube, of course. I think the first time I came across his content, I believe it was an episode about pricing. I think that was the one. I'm changing my business up a bit, which will mean a lot more conversations with clients. And usually I'm pretty good in conversations. But every now and then, something weird would happen. What would happen was that my nerves would be blocking me. I couldn't think. I was stressed out. So I thought, since I'm going to have these conversations many times more, let me work on that. I see something that doesn't go really well for me. I try to, maybe at first try to avoid it for a while. Let's be honest about that as well. In the end, I'm like, okay, this is bugging me. I need to do something about it. The training was called Conversational Selling. The thing that spoke to me about that training was, I'm not the kind of person, I don't want to be too salesy. When somebody approaches me and is really salesy and pushy in sales, it rubs me the wrong way. It goes into my allergy. And is that a word in English? Maybe I'm Dunglishing now.
It annoys you. That's just...
Yeah, I get annoyed, indeed. I'm okay, you're not getting anything from me because you're manipulating me or pushing me or doing something I don't like. I personally also don't want to be that person. Conversational selling, the way it was described, that really spoke to me. Having real, honest, good conversations with people. From that conversation, you can sell, but you're really trying to help your client. You're trying to help the person you're talking to. That was the part that I really liked. I thought, since I'm sometimes stressed out in the conversations, that would be great. And also because there was a role play.
Oh, wow.
That was really the thing I thought, okay, this is good for me. Because then I'm not only going to listen and learn and walk away, I've learned something and pretend like that was awesome all on its own. I really had to step in and role play. So that to me felt scary on the one hand. On the other hand, I thought this is what I need. Also because I knew there would be some coaching and help along the way.
Cool.
Yeah, so the role play part, that's a fun part of the training.
Oh, very cool. No, I thought it was really cool of you that you decided to go. Take the leap. London is not that far from the Netherlands, but it's still an international course. You still need to invest in yourself.
Yeah.
It was a 2-day course, I believe.
Yeah.
What were your main takeaways?
That's a big question. First off, and I think I speak for a lot of people in the group that I spoke to at least, there was just so many things to learn. After the first day, I called my wife, we were talking, and she, of course, asked this question. And I was like, okay, I love you, but I really can't answer it right now. There's so much going on in my head. Give me some time.
When you think of the course, what is the one thing or what's the first thing that jumps out to you?
I think for me personally, it's the focus on being myself, being me and being real. Also in a selling conversation, also in a coaching conversation. For the last couple of years, more and more I've seen that the more I am myself, the better I am in a situation, the better I can serve and help people, the better it is for me as well. Instead of playing a role of trying to do it the way it's supposed to be or other people expect, or maybe my own expectation, it's the part of really being me that spoke to me. And maybe for a listener, that's vague. Just be you, man. When I mentioned the problem I had, it's not only the stress, because stress, I think everybody can have stress for a talk, stress for a conversation. But to me, it links to fear of failure, imposter syndrome, a lot of stress, emotion, anxiety going on there. That was the problem I was trying to solve. How can I be in a conversation and how can I move forward in that conversation when I feel stress, anxiety? Because in stress, my brain turns to spaghetti. I can't really listen to the person sitting across from me. Then I can also not really help them. There are a lot of links back to coaching. And that was really interesting to me. Usually in a coaching conversation, I'm really good at hearing the specific things that are being said that are like they peek out from the conversation for me to ask questions about it. And then I can actually help somebody. With help somebody, I don't mean then I have a perfect solution for you, but then we can look at that problem together. I can stand next to the person and help them find a way forward.
How does that link to selling?
Yeah, so for me, I also coach organizations, of course. So I run across a lot of people, a lot of leaders, a lot of different hierarchy structures as well. And I've noticed with myself that there are certain times that I'm in a flow, I can basically do anything. I'm golden. I feel really good. But sometimes that fear of failure, the anxiety, imposter syndrome peaks up. And that can be in a conversation with somebody, maybe somebody I look up to, or maybe somebody that I think this person is really accomplished. Then in the back of my mind, the imposter guy starts to say, oh, what have you actually done? I've done a lot already, but at that moment, I don't feel like that.
Yeah.
And then the stress creeps in, and then I can't. Also in coaching conversations, that doesn't really happen too much to me in coaching situations, actually. But let's say for a group, and that would be triggered by somebody in the group, then that would mess me up. And I found ways to handle that, but I think for me, there are ways to handle something and there are ways to find a solution for something. And I've handled it for long enough and I was really looking for a solution. With the selling, and that's where the link is for me, if I feel like, do I have to prove myself towards the client? Do I have to show that I'm really good? Or do I have any hard evidence that I'm as good as I'm saying that I am? There's a lot going on in my mind, a lot of insecurities that get triggered in certain selling conversations as well, which makes me either undersell myself or be unable to really make clear what I can do for that person. And the worst thing about that is that it really the stress makes me focus on me instead of me being focused on what's going on. So let's say I'm doing workshops a lot of the times or training, and let's say that insecurity gets triggered in a workshop or a training. That's disastrous for me because I'm facilitating. I'm constantly trying to connect with the room, with the people, with what's going on. If I'm focused on me, then I'm distracted and I can't really do what I'm good at.
So in a sales conversation, that would be the same thing. And the advice of being yourself, how did that, I don't want to say solve the problem, but how did that mitigate for you that?
That was during the training, a remark that came, I think Joe Kim mentioned it, be the you is you. I think that it's a quote, be the you is you can be, which is a nice sentence, right? And the whole idea there is that when you're in a conversation and you're pretending to be something you're not, or you're, let's say, in some way, shape or form, taking on a role, then you're doing two things at the same time. You're trying to have good, real, honest conversations. That's hard enough because you're really trying to get to the core of the problem. You're really trying to find what's going on. It's like bicycling and juggling at the same time then. If I'm playing a role, so I'm not being me, there are people like circus artists or whatever kind of people that can probably do it. But I wonder if they can do it for a whole day.
Yeah.
The being yourself is, I think it's a theme for me for a longer time. So I picked up on that. And I think it was also communicated by the way Chris was, the way Jewel was. Actually, everybody in the team, they were really warm, really open, really themselves. And I like that because they never meet your heroes lingo that you always hear. And I'm not so much into the hero worship. But I think it's tempting. People have a certain view of you and to take on a role right then. But they were really themselves. And by being themselves, that showed me the extra that created. The something extra.
Yeah. And then because at the end of the day, selling, I think, is about differentiating yourself, right? There are multiple people that probably offer the service that you offer.
Yeah.
Me being one of them, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's say me and you are competing for a project, for an assignment. If we would both, I don't know, take a certain role, which usually is this cookie cutter role in corporate organizations of these agile coaches, or you see it in behavior, but also in the way people dress. It's all very much the same.
Yeah.
I think that makes it harder for yourself to differentiate yourself from your competitors.
What do you mean? When you dress like the rest, when you talk like the rest?
Yeah, So not only
You know me, right? So
Yeah.
when I'm me, I'm,
you're complete.
I'm my own kind of weirdo.
You're your own kind of person.
Yeah.
That's when you're at your best.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is, it's also what makes it easier for a client to understand, hey, is this the person that can help me solve my problem?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're presenting this, what I think is usually a cookie cutter version, it's his identity of, I don't know, a very corporate guy that is competent in everything and can solve any problem,
And I've done that in the past.
then yeah, there will be most likely 5 other candidates, 5 other entrepreneurs
That can offer the same thing.
Can offer the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And I think a personal connection is less likely to happen when you're showing up as an imposter almost than when you're yourself. A more authentic, a more real connection between you and the client is also able to exist, able to occur when you're yourself.
Yeah, I think so. I think people come to me, for instance, for coaching, because there's something about me that makes them want to get coached by me. And there's something in the way I approach it that makes them feel safe to open up and to talk about real things. And thinking about that, I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think that happens because
point.
I also try to have real conversations with people in everyday life. There's a reason this podcast is called Curiosity Killed the Coach. I'm seriously curious. And I think that's also the thing with being myself and being stressed, for instance, that the curiosity goes out of the window.
Yeah.
Because it's survival mode, right? Oh, stress, something's going on. I need to handle something. And then the curiosity goes because it's safer to be secure at that moment than to live on the curiosity edge.
Yeah.
And I prefer the curiosity because it's also, for me, the more I learn, the more I see what I don't know. I rather be curious and learn and try to figure out. And also in coaching, try to connect with people, try to see what the real problem for them is and be curious about why they do certain things and be curious about the things they tell themselves as well. Because that's also an interesting thing for me with the fear of failure and the anxiety and imposter syndrome. Even though I have that, somewhere in the past I've said, screw this, I'm going to go for it. And that was one of the things that also last couple of years I got conscious of it. And it also came up in a training that it's like going forward, full pedal, drive, but with the brakes on. So it costs double energy. I'm trying to move forward, but the brakes are on.
What do you mean by that?
It's like driving in a car, but your handbrake is on. You can still drive, right? Modern cars will probably stop you with the technology smartness, but you could drive with the handbrake on. But after a while, that would get really hot and you would break your car. So for me, saying to myself, I'm going to do it, even though I have all this anxiety, on the one hand, it helped me move forward. On the other hand, it takes so much of my energy that I'm like, okay, this is a problem for me. So instead of, like I said before, instead of finding a way to move forward only, I need to get the handbrake off. I need to get this resolved for myself.
Yeah.
And the reason that I mention it is because I wasn't aware what was the handbrake for me. But in this training about selling, it came up.
That actually brings me to another topic. You as a coach getting coached.
Yeah.
How is that?
Not only do I like it, I think it's essential, at least for me, to get a view on my blind spots. I think it's also humbling. I think it's nice to help other people, but if you only help other people and don't get any, it's like a pit stop. You need a pit stop for yourself as well and do some maintenance. I think that's really important. So for me, for the anxiety, for the fear of failure, I have coaching for that. And that really helps me as well and makes me work through some childhood stuff that, because that was this point where we went off this tangent. Was the things people say to themselves. There are things I say to myself, some conclusions are made or opinions I formed way back then that were maybe useful then, but are blocking me now.
Reframing those and putting those stories aside, that's where the challenge is. I think that's going back to the point. That's where I think nobody is exempt from needing a coach. I think everybody, even coaches, can benefit from getting coaching.
Yeah.
This did have me thinking. Obviously, you have general coaches, maybe you can call them more life coaches or professional coaches that approach it a bit more from a broader perspective. And you also have more mentors, trainers, experts that can coach you on a specific topic, like you did, for example, with conversational coaching or conversational selling.
Yeah.
Even though he did also touch on a broader topic, but
he sneaked in some stuff. In the meantime, I'll say the quote about he sneaked something in. He sneaked some therapy in. That was actually, shout out Martin Bargiel. He's a photographer from Germany, and he shared a post after after the training. He sneaked in some therapy. I like that very much. It was funny and true.
And true. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I'm more thinking about the difference between having expert coaching or more mentoring training versus general coaching as a coach.
You mean for a coach or?
Yeah, for a coach.
I can share my idea. I went to Chris because he's been for years sharing content and I just like the way that he did that. And I liked also there's something in it, right? When somebody gives something away for free, something valuable away for free. So he rose in my estimation. How do you say it? I think there's a better word for it in English. But we're Dutch people. So if you're listening, we're Dutch. We're constantly translating.
Forgive us for the poor vocabulary.
Yeah. I also heard in the training that we have a Dutch accent.
Wow.
Yeah, I did not know.
Wow.
So
how did you feel after that?
Yeah, I was like, okay, thanks. It makes sense, right? That we have an accent, but it's something you're not aware of. It's the funny thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, back to the topic, which I lost in the meantime. What was it again?
No, you were hyping Chris up. You were saying you enjoyed his way of presenting, the fact that he shared free content.
Yeah, so for me, on the conversational selling, the things that he said made me feel like, okay, this guy, what he's talking about, this is my style. This is how I would like to do it. He's talking a lot for creatives. I'm a very creative person. I'm also a coach. So I'm very happy actually with the conversational selling. The text said for creatives, and coaches. I love that they added the and coaches because I was like, is this for me? Should I do this? Isn't this all the imposter, all the escapes before you make a difficult decision? It came around. So I'm happy they added coaches. That made it easier for me to say, okay, let's just do this. For me, he's an expert. When I go to this training, I at least know that I can learn from him. And all the extra coaching, therapy and stuff that happened, there was the added extra, the added bonus. Because it felt like something I didn't know yet. So I think in coaching, a lot of times you help people see certain things about themselves. You, in a way, reveal things to them by conversation, by questioning, things that they might already know. And you help them gain that insight. You're facilitating their discovery. In teaching or mentoring, I think you're really also sharing new knowledge and guiding people like, I've been on this path before, follow the path. And I can show you some tricks. I can show you some tricks is a cheap word. But I can share my experience with you while you walk your own path. I think that's the thing. That's what I like. It's a different thing for me because otherwise I would have said, I already have coaching for fear of failure and that kind of stuff. I don't need this. I had a specific problem in a specific talking to clients and selling conversation that I wanted to address with this training. And I really wanted to solve this problem for myself. So all the added extras, you get that as well.
You get that as well. Yeah.
And I think you get it because the whole team, they really were themselves. Chris Doe, Jewel Kim, Rodrigo, Ivy, Sebastian, and Natalia, who was secretly sneaking in the back of the room drawing. We didn't know. I only learned after, which was really cool. But they were really themselves. And I think that being yourself and wanting to find the real problem for people, that's what made this training extra because you could only share the knowledge and let people practice. But what they really did is really connect with people and find, for me, there was a problem on the stress level during the conversation. For another person, there was maybe a problem with, let's say, overanalyzing. For another person, there was maybe like an insecurity, confidence type of thing. And I'm running out of examples. Yeah, fine. Exactly. I think they did a good job in connecting to the real problem for people. At least for me, that was the case. Looking around and talking with the people that were there, they really connected on that with others as well. And I think that's something.
That's impressive.
That's what I told you, right? I paid for this and I still feel like I should have paid more or do something for them. That's something, man. That's real value.
Without going into the details, I was curious, did you have a feeling that for most people, the challenge was more related to mindset and managing your emotions versus actual selling techniques?
There were questions, of course, about selling techniques. And there was time in between where you could have one-on-one chats and talk about certain questions you had, which was really nice as well. I think it's good to be conscious that every conversation that you go to, you bring yourself into that conversation. So for me, I had the stress, the imposter syndrome, the fear of failure. That was my topic. I think for somebody else, that person is bringing something else into that conversation. What I really liked was one of the things they taught us was ask good questions. If you're listening to this podcast and you're a coach, this is really important thing. This is why I see so many similarities to Chris' approach and coaching conversations, because you're trying to get to the real problem and you're trying to have an as genuine possible conversation with the person.
Yeah.
That reveals something. You're not trying to give them a solution. You're trying to get the problem clear. And then you have clarity on if you're even able to help them with the real problem that they have.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Very similar to coaching, like you
Yeah,
mentioned.
exactly.
Same process. And I think the difference then might be in coaching, you try to figure out what a realistic next step would be. And then you try together with that person the next steps that they can take in order to get to that next stage.
Yeah, but let me ask you a question then, because for me, thinking about this, in the coaching conversations that I have, like 80-90% of it is getting to that real problem.
Yes.
Really talking and getting a new view on what's bugging people. I recognize this from myself as well. You have the superficial things that come up and they don't feel real. On a certain point, you feel, oh, hold on, we've got something here. And then you circle around that real problem until you get to the core of it. The last, let's say 10% of the conversation is looking forward, because analyzing what's really going on.
Yeah, I think one thing is coming to that realization. The next step is accepting. That's really what it is.
Yeah, and this is certainly not always in one conversation.
No, exactly. I mean, if you get to that point in the first conversation, you did really well. But
you mean the client?
Yeah, the client did really well, and then the coach probably also had a helping hand in that. But yeah, as a client, you did really well, and as a coach, I think you did well to get there. And yeah, usually the ideas then after you get, I want to say, impediments clear. I feel like when you get to that point, I wouldn't want to say it's a lot easier, because I also think that step can be challenging when someone realizes, okay, this is my challenge. Yeah. These are the blocking issues for me, maybe some limiting beliefs that I have.
That's a term that came through the training a lot, limiting beliefs.
Limiting beliefs that you have.
Thanks, because that's exactly the thing, the limiting beliefs that you have.
You can be aware of a limiting belief. You can accept that's really what's happening.
Yeah.
But then, even though you might have mapped out an action, no, not even before the action, I think some people do still get stuck on that point.
Yeah.
Myself included. That you're like, okay, I know this is my limiting belief.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure how I can move forward. So as a coach, I feel like that's also a part in the process where, you definitely can add a lot of value.
Yeah. So the interesting thing for me was all the problems discussed during the role plays were real problems. Also in front of the group. Because when you take let's talk about some artificial problem, you can be consistent, right? In your role play. We're not that good of actors. At least maybe you are, but I'm not.
Definitely.
I really liked that they were real problems. We were talking with the three of us and I was like, I can now think of something, or I can just share, guys, I'm here in this training because when I'm in these types of conversations, every now and again, I feel really stressed and fear of failure. It doesn't happen all the time. I'm not quite sure yet what messes me up in these conversations. Then they started asking really good, genuine questions to help you dig deeper into the problem, which you're supposed to do also in a selling call. The reason that I mentioned this, because you mentioned limiting beliefs. You can have a view of the problem, but not the solution yet. In the conversation, it started off with Daniel and Joe, two really great guys, by the way. And afterwards, I had another role play conversation with Daniel from Norway and Theo. Something happened there, and that was really nice for me. That was really something that we had several conversations. And you try to really ask simple, obvious questions. It's hard to really be in that conversation, doing something new and asking really good questions, right? But we had a few iterations, and at a certain point in that conversation, they were teaming up. Both of them could ask the questions. And I was the person with the problem, of course. Something really cool happened, because when you're with the two of you, one can really listen when the other is talking. Then you have some distance and you can get some clarity. Daniel had a question. I think the question was, when this happens to you, where do you see yourself? Something like that. And all of a sudden, I couldn't answer. Full on emotion. And that's so cool. Asking a really good question as a coach, asking a really good question for somebody you want to help, that's really something. Immediately when he asked that question, I saw myself 20 years ago as a young Michel, not being able to stand up for himself and feeling that powerless. And here I am 20 years later, having learned a lot. And that's what happens to me in a conversation when that fear of failure comes up. That to me was an insight. The fact that I was basically knocked into my 20-year-old self that felt totally powerless in a shitty situation.
But what a question.
Oh, that was a really good question.
What a question.
And it knocked me straight there. And the answer was so strong for me that I have a hard time remembering the question. I think the second question was, it had to do something with where do you see... No, I'm coming up with a shitty question now. I don't want to do him that disservice. He had a really good question. So two of them. And the first one hit all my buttons and emotions and was really good and gave me instant clarity on the problem. And the second one was an added insight. In that moment in time, when that happened to me and I felt so powerless, I started fighting for myself. Now, 20 years later, I think I'm still doing that. I'm still fighting. Those two things were really strong insights for me. If that would have been all the training, it would have been worth it still.
Yeah.
So just the power of really deep questions and the limiting beliefs, the conversations you have in your mind, the conclusions that you made about yourself based on those things. For me, this gave me really insight and this really helped me forward. Afterwards, I had to do a role play the next day. Wasn't totally fixed magically all of a sudden, of course. I struggled in the role play. I really was stressed out still. But now I knew where it came from. That was one thing. And it was really nice to be supported. And I think that's the thing that really tied it together for me, was that during that role play, Chris asked me, what type of conversation are you relaxed? I said, in coaching conversations, I'm focused on that other person and finding the nuances in the words they say and hearing the things they're really saying and connecting with them. So he said to me, just talk to that person like he's already a client of yours. That was a great idea. It didn't still really work for me straight away. But one remark that he made was, coaching is helping other people. Selling, and selling done this way, is helping other people. That's what I really liked. This is also why I think this kind of way of connecting with a client and doing something for them and asking money for the things you do feels good and okay, because you're actually trying to do something good.
Yeah.
There's actually some integrity there.
Yeah, because obviously we pre-discussed the podcast a bit, and one of the things you also took away from it is value exceeds price.
Yeah. So Chris has the 4 agreements, how to sell with integrity. I have them here, by the way. It's do good work. That means you have your expert niche, so you have something to offer. And consistency, and I read that as you have the discipline and that you're going to persist in doing good work. 2 is price fairly. That's value exceeds price. I think that's also for me, okay, I am charging money and it's not necessarily cheap, but what I want indeed is always that my value exceeds that price. Serve others, prioritize clients' needs. That also ties into asking the real questions. So that's the thing, right? If you're prioritizing your own needs, I'm going to ask you questions that will lead to a sale. If I prioritize the client's needs, I'm going to ask questions that is going to drive toward the real problem. So I'm going to ask real questions to uncover the real problem. And that in itself, that clarity in itself is already exceeding value that you're giving right, to a client. And 4 is act with integrity. Do the right thing even when it's difficult or unpopular.
Very cool.
Do the right thing even when somebody's not watching.
I was curious because determining the value that you provide for a client can be challenging.
Yeah.
Because let's say in our business, you're running a workshop for a client. Were there also tips on that?
For me, I already do this. When I do a workshop, in the beginning, I really work hard to get the goal of what we're trying to achieve with that workshop really clear. And I'll tell you why. That has to do with my fear of failure. When I started doing workshops and I was really tensed and scared to do them because it was really like a chance to fail, I really focused on, okay, I want to get this right. I want people in a few months to be able to look back and say, this was valuable. I really try to drive towards what's the real problem we're trying to solve? What's the real goal of this workshop? And then when we do the workshop, usually in the end, because I think it's nice to do a workshop in a kind of an artificial space because you're out of your regular work. And as soon as you get back into your regular work, all the things we discussed, kind of hard to implement. So in my workshops, I always drive in the end towards how will we implement this in real life. Just to say also that sometimes fear of failure has its bonuses, that I really want to make sure that there's value. And that value is indeed not always quantifiable. For instance, when you talk to clients about certain problems that they have that really have an impact on their business and on the money they make, it might be a bit more quantifiable. But when you talk about mindset, that's different.
Yeah. Yeah.
In personal coaching, it's really dependent as well on the person doing the work. That's for me also the reason why I think we mentioned that last podcast, right? That I want people to get a better view on what's bugging them, to be able to find a path forward for themselves, to be able to walk that path and to either succeed or fail, because nothing's going to work maybe the first time. But if they succeed, it's their win. If they fail, it's their lesson. If I tell them what to do, if they win, it's because I had a great idea and I told them exactly what to do and they did it. So it's not really their victory then. And when they fail, it's their failure, right? Because it's not mine, because I taught you exactly the right way. This is not my type of coaching.
Yeah.
I really want to help people make clear for themselves where they want to grow and what direction they want to move to. And the action they take is something they're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's not just about this specific challenge. At the end of the day, it's also about having the tools to tackle similar or completely other challenges.
That's also why we, after this podcast, we always try to link it to something people can do for themselves, right? So I do think we like to offer some solutions, but to do it, that's on them. That's important, I think, as well. I think that's also important why you need coaching yourself. For me, at least, it's that I keep learning. So I discover new ways that might also help my clients, and that I might uncover things about myself that I'm blind to or that are blocking me. So I'm a few steps further on the path. Sometimes you can even help people when you're just one step ahead. When I started my business, I talked to people that had started a business maybe a half year earlier or a year earlier. They were wizards in my eyes because they knew so much that I didn't know. I think that's the same. In a way, it's the same with coaching, that the path that you've gone, at least, let's say the dragons that you haven't slain yourself are hard to help your clients slay.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it speeds up your learning as well, because you could go the route of trying to figure it out yourself, experimenting with different ways on how to tackle that personal challenge that you have. And eventually you might get there, or you could purchase the help of whether it's a mentor, coach, or trainer.
Yeah.
And get that help and speed up your learning and get there way faster.
Yeah, and so for me, because I'm constantly learning, but usually I'm learning through listening to podcasts, through reading books, talking to people, but mostly on my own, reading, listening, watching, learning. I went to this training on purpose because I knew I had to mix in with other people and role play in front of other people. Sometimes it's very safe to learn on my own, but I thought I need to do something here to really make leaps forward. Most people don't know, I think, but I'm awkward in social situations. But I also am capable at times of just getting the first step in and to have a conversation. This is funny to me because I was early at the training. I was eager. Also
excited.
Also, I had some anxiety, was up early and was really like, okay, oh my God, I'm gonna meet a lot of new people. How will this go? Will I feel alone in a crowd? Will I feel some connection or not? So I felt some stress there. I came into the venue, it was almost empty. One guy was there. That was Joel, by the way.
Another participant.
Yeah, other participant. And I came in and I was like, okay, let me get some coffee. And I greeted him, got my coffee. I saw him, he sat down at a table. He was on his phone. I was like, oh, maybe it's early mornings, right? He's starting up. Let me not bother him. I'll go to this table. I was almost sitting down and was like, what am I doing? This is your anxiety right now. This is your fear of it. Okay, I grabbed my coffee, my bag. I went over to his table. I said, do you mind if I join you? And he was like, oh no, of course. Immediately we had a fun conversation. I think Daniel came in after some time, also joined us. We were having a really great conversation, really connecting very quickly. I liked it. So my anxiety went out the window that moment. I think somebody else was like, hey, you guys come together? No, we just met. That was an awesome moment for me. But later on, I heard that Joe had the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Coming in there, so that's so cool. I don't know how we got in this thread. Oh yeah, the learning part. That was the thing. Learning on my own is nice and safe. If I try something nobody sees, now I had to get out of my comfort zone. I needed to talk to people I didn't know, feel some anxiety, but the reward is really big. I really connected with a lot of people there. And that was, for me, that was really something.
Very cool.
Yeah, I always dread the tell me something about yourself round, which wasn't there.
Very typical Dutch thing.
Yeah.
For every meeting of...
They created an interactive version of that without the awkwardness because, oh no, I have to tell a tiny story about my life, but what part will I tell and what do I leave out? By the way, I just heard the stories of everybody else that were way cooler than me doing awesome things. So what can I tell about myself?
Yeah.
Not knowing, of course, that those other people are most likely feeling the same thing. What am I gonna say? This guy already told something cool. If I tell the same, it's gonna look like I copied him. So for me, this goes really quick in my head. I was happy to be out there to talk to people and to have that interaction while learning. That was really a bonus.
What would be one practical tool, because we do that, or practical tip that we, based off this training, you would like to offer our dear listeners?
I think as a coach, or if you're a leader that does coaching or whatever setting you're in, make sure you learn and make sure you find a community or you find maybe a coach or a mentor, but you make steps for yourself to learn. And this isn't, I think, a really pragmatic, simple tool, but maybe a simple tool would be find somebody that you can either learn from or talk to gain some insights.
Yeah. And for you, would there be a preference live versus virtual? Because we're in the world of online courses and online coaching.
Yeah, I like that this was in person. But I think, for instance, if you're looking for a coach, you could very well have a digital session. You could. I think what you need to look for in a coach is that, do you have that connection? Because if you do not feel that connection, maybe very unlikely that you will really be comfortable to open up to this person. So I think that's an important thing, find the connection. And also with connection, maybe find a person that's good for you. You're not looking for a friend, you're looking for somebody that will also tell you some hard truths, but you need to be able to communicate with this person. So look for somebody that can actually help you, and look for somebody that you have some connection with. What that connection is, that may differ per person.
Yeah.
I think.
Cool.
Yeah, and maybe a very practical thing is ask good questions, but also ask simple questions. Oh, maybe I should say it differently. Ask good question means ask the obvious and simple questions. The moment we have a conversation and something piques my interest, I can either ask you about that, or I can say, ooh, if I ask this question, is this a dumb question? Am I going to make a fool of myself? Shouldn't I already know this? Did he answer this before and did I forget? You get into your own head. Sometimes it's worth the risk, I think, to ask that simple, obvious question, because it's not so much about asking the perfect question. It's about getting the interaction going, and with simple questions, dig deeper and find the core of the problem or the core of the thing you really want to discuss.
Yeah, beautifully said.
Cool. But for you, Eric, because of course this is about training I followed and it was really cool and I'm happy to share about it. But I think learning is for all. Now, what do you do personally for your own growth as a coach?
I think it was very similar to what you mentioned. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books. I try to cluster my learning.
Yeah.
I focus on one specific subject and do it for 3 months.
Oh.
For example, the last quarter, I focused on facilitation. Then the only thing I try to learn is facilitation.
Okay, but why?
I realized in this world where there are so many podcasts about so many different topics, content and knowledge is so widespread, comes at you so frequently that I noticed for myself that if I, let's say, did a course on selling, after that, listened to a podcast about facilitation or this online webinar about facilitation, I didn't have the time to implement the skills that I learned or the knowledge that I learned in that selling workshop. I wouldn't recall most of the information, even though it was super valuable and I think useful. I didn't implement it, therefore I also didn't recall it, and it didn't stick. So by doing this, by clustering my learning a bit better, one, you dive deeper into a subject, so you really have a feeling afterwards, hey, I know a lot more than before I started. And secondly, I also have the opportunity to implement it. Enough time also to implement it. So what I try to do, I look for situations where I can flex my facilitation skills, for example.
Yeah.
So that's a new thing that I'm doing.
Yeah, I like that.
But as well as what you mentioned, and I can definitely second that, those live 2-day courses where you're with a group of other people following a specific course on a subject that currently is maybe a pain point for you, that's very valuable. One, you gain knowledge that can help you at least mitigate those feelings of maybe incompetence, or also on a content perspective, those knowledge gaps that you have. But secondly, I think the advantage of it is also you network. So you meet people that either are facing the same challenge, or in our case, colleague coaches that maybe have business opportunities for you, or just people that you can have a nice conversation with regarding our profession. You never know when those contacts come in handy.
Yeah.
My preference, I think physically, it's you build that connection with fellow participants a lot better than you do virtually.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not to say that digital workshops or digital coaching is not valuable. So that's more my knowledge. And from my experience, it definitely speeds up your learning. So I can recommend it to everyone.
Yeah, for me also the in-person part. I'm trying to think now of a web training, digital training. I don't think I have an example or a moment that I had that deep of a connection. We really had deep conversations very quickly with people you almost don't know, because you're close together. You can really have that intimate conversation. Digitally, I think that's way harder. Very practically, we went out to eat afterwards and stuff like that. To me, yeah, I think that was really also, I feel like I keep saying added bonus. There are so many bonuses.
Yeah.
But that was really something, just to have the time as well to process what you learned, to discuss. And for instance, with the asking good questions, you saw everybody started to practice with those questions. The cool thing is that we're actually connecting online now.
Cool.
With participants, because you can get it taught in 2 days, but to get it down so you really can do it, you need some time.
Yeah, I like that sequence. So I like the fact that first it was live.
Yeah.
So it was an in-person workshop. Just like you mentioned, big difference is virtually you have the same networking opportunities, but those informal conversations at dinner, when you're getting coffee, those don't happen in a virtual space.
Yeah, walking away to the coffee machine or both running to the toilet at the same time, laughing about it. No, you go ahead.
And
a lot of human connection in those small things.
In those moments, and I think as soon as because you had dinner, you're in an informal setting. I think people's guards also go down then, even though you might still be implementing the skills and techniques like you mentioned, asking good questions, tips and tricks that you guys got offered during the workshop, but you're doing it in an informal setting. For most people, that's also, there's an added level of comfort there that you might not have when you feel like all eyeballs are on you. You're in the training environment. And then to have that essentially move to the digital space afterwards, after you've had that connection, I think to me, that's a smart sequence.
Yeah, I would say better than the other way around, but actually we met the other way around. I don't know if you remember, but it was COVID times when we met, man. So we were having digital conversations first. When I met you, I was like, dang, this guy is tall.
Oh, that's funny.
Eric is tall, guys, just so you know. So I was like, now the basketball stories make sense.
Yeah, that was funny. We met at an interesting time. But, and I think, again, to my point, the relationship grew. We were part of a larger team, not only with me, but I, to speak for myself, also with the rest of our team. It grew when we started seeing each other physically again. I remember you had that was very smart of you. Looking back at it, you went to go visit each of us in our cities.
Yeah, I did walks and talks.
You did walks and talks. Very COVID-proof, guys. Michel was very responsible. But that helped.
Yeah.
Afterwards, when I think we had a launch of some feature that we had developed, we met for the first time physically. That also added a whole new dynamic, a lot more comfort. You also had those moments of, oh, damn, you're a lot taller or you're a lot skinnier or you're a lot whatever than I initially thought. Yeah. But there is for sure this extra benefit to seeing someone face to face and having informal conversations.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and I think when you mentioned the walks and talks, so for me that was a hack, right? Because I was going crazy behind my laptop in COVID times, staying indoors. If we could find a safe way to walk outside together, and it was also allowed at the time, to walk and to talk, that was just great.
Yeah.
Walking coaching. It was really cool.
It was cool.
It was.
I think that's it for today.
Yeah, Eric. Thanks for the conversation.
Thanks for the conversation. Thanks for the learnings. The curiosity from this coach is killed.
It's awesome to do this together. Check the show notes for information. I'll drop some links there as well. Also to the Conversational Selling workshops. I would highly recommend them. If you want to contact us, want to give us any comments, questions, maybe topics for the next time, let us know. This was
Curiosity Killed
the coach.